Dear colleagues, partners, distinguished speakers, and honored guests, we sincerely welcome you to UN Women's event on preventing violent extremism in a pandemic. I am Asuka Murata at the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and I am honored to be moderating this event today. We have a number of distinguished guests and who will be joining us throughout the rest of this morning. Through this event, we will showcase how the COVID-19 context has sparked innovative ways of preventing violent extremism and boosting gender equality, as well as new research on the subject of the gender and PVE. We are joined by a number of distinguished speakers, including from academia, UN Women, and program beneficiaries, and the private sector. The event will be divided into 3 sections. The first, the presentation of key findings from the innovative research. The second, sharing of insights from a global consultation on gender and PCVE hosted by UN Women. And third, discussion from youth activists on the ground on the key results of their work this year, and what COVID-19 has taught them about gender equality, women's empowerment, and PVE. We will have Q&A session. We will have a Q&A session, so please use the Q&A chat function to ask your questions, and we will answer as many as possible during this event. If you want to share your comments, please also use the chat function. To begin, let us hear from colleagues for brief welcoming remarks. First, we will hear from Ms. Sarah Nips, Deputy Regional Director, UN Women, Asia and Pacific. Thank you, Sarah, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to this event, Preventing Violent Extremism in a Pandemic, taking stock of progress on PVE from a gender perspective in Asia. We would like to especially thank the government of Japan for their generous support to this event, as well as to welcome the National Counter-Terrorism Agency, BNPT of Indonesia, BRAC University of Bangladesh, and our many speakers and audience from academia, civil society, and the private and public sector. We're also really excited to have many young female and male participants from various countries in Asia joining us for the discussion today. With thanks to the government of Japan, UN Women has been implementing a regional program on preventing violent extremism through women's empowerment in Asia for the last 4 years. When this project began, women in the region were facing distinct threats from violent extremism, while being left out of many of the efforts that sought to manage these threats. Through this program, we have worked together to remedy this imbalance by placing women and their human rights at the center of efforts to tackle violent extremism and empowering women as activists for change. Throughout the years, these women have faced numerous challenges in their work while promoting social cohesion in their communities. But as you all know, the past year we have all faced a very different kind of challenge with the COVID-19 pandemic. And while many aspects of life may have stopped and slowed, one thing did not: the threat of violent extremism. As women in at-risk communities were figuring out how to feed their families, educate their children, and maintain their health, they also faced the same persistent struggle presented by extremism. As you will hear from researchers later on today, misogyny is central to the ideologies of extremist groups, and this misogyny was only exacerbated by the pandemic. With amazing strength and resilience, women in our region found innovative ways of preventing violent extremism, maintaining peace, and boosting gender equality in their communities. Despite the very challenging and unique circumstances, these women have worked online and offline to combat enhanced threats to their physical safety, increased online hate speech and misogyny, and challenges to social cohesion brought on by the pandemic. In this event today, we would really like to honor them and showcase their solutions, which are so timely to inform the next steps of our work. Last month, ASEAN, Canada, and UN Women have jointly launched a 5-year regional program empowering women for sustainable peace, preventing violence and promoting social cohesion in ASEAN. It will focus on advancing women, peace and security in the region, including conflict prevention and PVE work. We look forward very much to taking the lessons learned from here, combining good practices and helping take them to scale in the ASEAN region with our partners. UN Women looks forward to jointly collaborating with UN and other dialogue partners, including Japan, Canada, and others, to continue this important work that focuses on the central role of women as peace agents. This will be a critical building block towards a more inclusive and peaceful society as we build back better as part of COVID-19 recovery. Thank you all once again for your participation, and we hope that you enjoy and find usefulness in this event. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Next, we will hear from Mr. Fumihiko Goto, Counselor and Deputy Permanent Representative of Japan to SCAP, Embassy of Japan in Thailand. And many thanks to Japan for their support to this event and to UN Women's program. Mr. Goto, over to you. Thank you.
Ms. Sarah Cripps, Deputy Regional Director of UN Women Asia Pacific. Dear participant, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. It is a pleasure to join you and say a few words at the beginning of this virtual regional meeting on the project of preventing violent extremism in a pandemic. I thank particularly Ms. Asuka Murata for your devotion of the work to this program and giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of my government, Japan. The government of Japan highly appreciates our partnership with the UN Women, which has been supporting women and girls in vulnerable situations based on its own research, analysis, and expertise. Since the outbreak of the pandemic for over a year, Japan has extended the support of $4.5 million to UN Women through the supplementary budget to help women affected by COVID-19 in the developing countries. This project is a part of our collaboration. COVID-19 has severely impacted women and girls, particularly in marginalized communities. Due to the pandemic, domestic and sexual violence has become ever more serious. Moreover, it is said that people have become more easily influenced by misogyny, online hate speech, and violent extremism during the coronavirus pandemic. In Asia, terrorist organizations are inciting people to terrorism through the internet or SNS. There is a great concern that the COVID-19 pandemic presents recruitment and operational opportunity to them. When we started talking about post-pandemic with the rollout various vaccination programs around the world, it is important to take stock of what has been left behind in terms of violent extremism and the role that women have played in countering it. So today's meeting is most timely. I'm looking forward to learning more about the role that women have been playing in promoting gender equality, building a resilient society, and spreading messages of peace and tolerance through social and economic entrepreneurship in Indonesia, Bangladesh, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. With the concept, no one is left behind in our mind, Japan is willing to maintain and enhance our collaboration with local partners present here today. And of course, UN Women, which has been playing a leading role in women, peace, and security. I do hope that this event will provide a precious opportunity for all participants and wish your endeavor every success. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goto, for your remarks and your steadfast commitment to UN Women and most importantly to the women and girls in this region. Now we will hear from Mr. Adnika Krishnanjuando, who is the Deputy of International Cooperation of the National Counterterrorism Agency, BNPT, Indonesia. And I am deeply saddened by the news of the bomb attack on Sunday, and I express my sincere sympathy to the people of Indonesia. And thank you very much for joining us today. Mr. Christian Blanto, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and also for the sympathies expressed with the latest bombing in Makassar, Indonesia. Ms. Sarah Knips, Regional Director of UN Women Asia Pacific, Mr. Fumihiko Goto, Counselor and Deputy Permanent Representative of Japan to ESCAP, Embassy of Japan in Thailand, Mr. Mansur Hassan, Executive Director of Center for Peace and Justice, BRAC University, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning to you all. At the outset, allow me to convey our utmost appreciation to UN Women and the government of Japan for hosting this very important meeting. Indeed, we are very honored to take part in this event as a platform for sharing experiences and understanding challenges facing women working in preventing violent extremism and promoting social cohesion. I firmly believe that the outcome of this esteemed workshop will greatly contribute to the efforts in preventing and countering international terrorism and violent extremism during the COVID-19 pandemic, as they are a global problem as well as concern. Uh, Distinguished participants, the COVID-19 has caused severe consequences and fragilities for almost every country in the world in many areas, including in the efforts of preventing and countering terrorism and violent extremism. The UNCTAD report highlighted that the impact of the pandemic on our effort to counter terrorism and violent extremism has two uh, risks. One, that is a short-term risk, and two, there is a long-term risk. If you're looking at the short-term risk, the threat appearing in the pandemic would include that there is a captive audience where during the pandemic, many are going online, including ourselves in this event. And also there is the part where terrorists or violent extremist groups would use the opportunity to further their narratives. Another one is that the violent extremist groups would use this opportunity, the pandemic, in the short term as the alternative service providers. Now, in the long term, we see the risk that there is resources being depleted because of the government focusing on efforts to combat the threat of the virus, the COVID virus. Two, that it has an impact on the PCB actors where less budget are being secluded towards our effort in preventing and countering violent extremism. And also the long-term risk of the pandemic is that the society will form a sense of grievances, and that would be one of the drivers that leads to violent extremism. Distinguished participants, how is it in Indonesia? Indonesia has witnessed the involvement and the role of women in a number of terrorist acts. The Surabaya bombing in 2018, the Sibolga bomb incident in 2019, and also recently the bomb incident in Makassar, Indonesia, does look into the fact that women are also now not just as victims, but also supporters and perpetrators of terrorism. It has shown that during the pandemic, men and also women are still being recruited by the magnitude of the problem, as one of the reports coming in from IPAC, the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution based in Indonesia, has seen that before ISIS, the police in Indonesia has apprehended around 4 women, but in 2018 to 2019, there are 30 women that have been apprehended, and this is after ISIS was established in 2014. Now, as of September 2020, 39 women are facing or are being convicted and awaiting for trial. Now, the latest survey that has been done by the National Counterterrorism Agency of the Republic of Indonesia through its Coordinating Forum for the Prevention of Terrorism, which is located in 52 provinces, has seen that women, in particular young women in the urban areas, the Generation Z and the millennials are more prone to being radicalized than men. The survey also showcased that the Binika, which is tolerance and pluralism within women, are much higher than men. So again, this was a survey that was conducted during the pandemic, but it does showcase how online mechanism and the misuse of online by terrorists are still being conducted, and much of the audience is focused on women. Now, the government of Indonesia is of the belief that women's empowerment, gender mainstreaming, and gender response in the efforts of PCVE is instrumental. To deal with this issue, Indonesia has recently passed the Presidential Decree number 7 of 2021 on the National Plan of Action on Countering Violent Extremism that leads to terrorism, signed by the President Joko Widodo in January 6, 2021. The National Action Plan provides a holistic strategy that consists of three pillars, namely prevention, and the second pillar, law enforcement, and the third pillar, partnership and international cooperation. If you're looking towards the National Action Plan, if you're doing word count, there are around 40 words that does explicitly mention women. There are 10 programs dedicated to enhancing the role of women, participation in decision making, including leadership in preventing and countering violent extremism. Gender mainstreaming is one of the main principles of the National Action Plan. There are specific measures that focus on prevention and participation of women in the National Action Plan involving different line ministries as well as non-governmental actors, and this gives prominence for a multi-layered and multi-agency approach to a gender responsiveness in addressing terrorism and violent extremism in all its manifestations. Distinguished participants, in conclusion, it is our fervent hope that this workshop will be of benefit to all. I look forward to a lively discussion in a view to seek a promising ways and tools to address terrorism and violent extremism during the pandemic, including the issue of women empowerment and gender responsiveness. I do hope we will enrich our knowledge, broaden our perspective, and better understand the means to garner women as peace builders and promoters or preventers of violent extremism and terrorism. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cristina Anduanto, for sharing the challenges, and also it is wonderful to hear of the amazing work being done in Indonesia. Lastly, let us hear from Mr. Manzu Hassan, Executive Director, Center for Peace and Justice, Brack University, who are one of our amazing implementing partner for this project in Bangladesh. Mr. Hassan, over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I am having slight internet issues here, but I will do my best to keep connected. First of all, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to speak before you. It's been a wonderful privilege to be working with UN Women over the last 2.5, 3 years. We hopefully intend to continue with this groundbreaking work with our colleagues in Bangladesh and also regionally. Let me make a few points that I would like to very much highlight before you. Number one, I think that women are both victims and perpetrators in case of violent extremism and religious radicalization. Involvement of women is absolutely essential in building resilience and peaceful society, and thereby deal with the issue of PVE. This Asia Pacific Regional Program, sorry, I have been asked to open my video, so I hope you can see me. This Asia Pacific Regional Program of UN is a great success in this endeavor. Among others, the Women Peace Cafe that we started in Bangladesh with the help of our colleagues in the 2 private universities, and is one of the many initiatives that we have seen in the region, which includes, as my colleagues have said, from Indonesia, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. The second point that I would like to highlight is this: the flexibility and support provided by the UN Women team, both in the country and from the regional office, in the various phases of the project, is, I think, a symbol of effective and efficient partnership that we have developed with UN Women. We really appreciate the cordial support of UN Women Bangladesh team and also the faculty member and leadership of the two public universities, the Jatiyo Kobi Kazi Nazrul Islam University and Begum Rokeya University, and the faculty of the two universities. And they have been very supportive and extremely effective in the way they have partnered with us and UN Women throughout this whole period. The third point that I would like to highlight is the fact that COVID-19 has brought a lot of challenges for women and children and girls, particularly as we witness a serious rise of domestic violence and harassment, both mental and physical. In this phase of our work, the UN, with UN Women, the Women Peace Cafe members have brought their work, taken their work beyond the university campus under the Women Peace Ambassador Initiative. Our peace ambassadors' work on COVID-19 has been around the area of awareness raising, cohesive building of the society, and material support. And finally, we feel that our journey has been very much gender inclusive. We have also incorporated in our work male students from these two universities under the leadership of women. So it's been a groundbreaking experience for us working with UN Women and other organizations, particularly the two universities that I've mentioned. And we hope and we intend to continue with this work. And we are in the process of actually taking this idea of Peace Cafe to other universities in Bangladesh. So again, finally, I thank you all. I thank particularly UN Women team in Bangladesh and in the region for the support that they've given us. And without the support, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we have achieved. So I wish all of you great success and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Mr. Hassan. We look forward to hearing more about the work of Brock University later in this program.
Thank you.
It is also, it is so nice to have role models and strong advocates for promoting peace through empowerment for women, as we need dialogues and partnership among all genders and all generations. And we are also so pleased to have so many female and male participants and youth joining us today. Now I would like to open the first discussion on new and innovative research. For everyone joining us, please remember that you are encouraged to use the Q&A chat function to ask your questions, and there will be answer on live or in the Q&A box. Please also keep eye on the chat for the links and further information on what is being discussed. So first presenter is Mr. Priyank Mathew, founder and CEO of Methods Labs. Priyank, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Asika. Thank you to all of you for joining. Thank you to Mr. Goto for your support, and to the government of Japan for your generous support. And of course, to UN Women, who have been an invaluable partner for 3.5, 4 years now. And we've also really enjoyed working with BRAC. So thank you, Mr. Hassan and Zia and your team and all your colleagues. I'm just going to share my screen and walk you through some of the activities that we did. So I hope everybody can see my presentation. We, with the support of UN Women and the government of Japan, engaged in 3 activities working towards PVE in a pandemic. Those were centered around new research examining the link between COVID and online misogyny, trainings in Bangladesh and the Philippines, teaching young women how to create positive themed content and how to protect against misinformation and hate speech and extremist content. And then the creation of comedy videos that use humor and entertainment to convey positive messages, counter the narratives and provide alternative narratives to extremist messaging. So as Asika was kind enough to mention, I'm Priyank Mathur. I head Methods Labs. We use media and technology to counter harmful narratives, gender inequality, and misinformation and violent extremism. So the first activity that I'd like to walk you through is, of course, the research we did. We looked at the link between COVID-19 and online misogyny to try and understand if there is a link and what that link is. And what we found was that overwhelmingly, COVID has had an impact on online misogyny. Particularly, we found three key insights. Number one, the volume and interest in misogynist content has increased during COVID lockdowns on social media. Number two, sexist organizations. These are organizations aligned with the incel movement or organizations like MGTOW or men's rights groups. They're actually spreading new COVID-related narratives on Facebook and on Twitter and other social media platforms. And then thirdly, an interesting and disturbing insight was that on Twitter, accounts that are tweeting misogynist content are disproportionately more influential than regular accounts. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but I'll start with the first insight. The volume and interest in misogynist content increased during COVID lockdowns. So what we did is we looked at and we conducted this study across Asia, across 7 countries in Asia. And for on Facebook, we focused on India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia. So we monitored some groups, again, like the groups I had mentioned, the incel-aligned groups or groups focused on men's rights, groups that had openly misogynist missions and philosophies on Facebook. And we looked at the volume of posts that they posted during the most intense phase of lockdown. So we're talking March to June of 2020. And what we found was that when you compare it to the same period in 2019, there was a notable increase in content in 2020. You can see from this graph about 3 times the number of posts. And this far outweighs the organic growth in internet usage that happened between 2019 and 2020. So we suspect that might be linked to COVID. Same thing, another interesting insight on India, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka, again, looking at misogynist posts during lockdown, what you see is a correlation between how strict the lockdown is and how high the volume and interest in these posts is. So you can see that volume of posts and engagement with posts, which is likes, shares, comments, that kind of peaked around late April, which was, as you probably remember, the time when most countries were in the most severe form of lockdown. And then as lockdown started easing, you started seeing that interest and volume of content come down. So it shows there might be a correlation when people are stuck at home, they're spending more time online, and unfortunately, online misogyny is increasing quite dramatically. This is a graph of looking at what happened on Twitter during that time. Same trend, right? So the volume of misogynist tweets, which we defined as tweets that contain openly misogynist terms, misogynist humor, and we'll get to what those terms were later. But that volume increased all the way up until sort of May, while lockdown was getting stricter, and then gradually started to come down in the first couple of weeks of June, as things started to ease. And on Twitter, we focused on India, Indonesia, and Philippines, because as our colleagues from Indonesia and Philippines who are on this call, and India, will tell you, these are 3 markets where Twitter is quite popular. They're 3 of Twitter's biggest markets in the world, actually. We also looked at Google search trends. And what you'll see that's interesting, and again, a little disturbing, is that searches for misogynist terms peaked during COVID. We're looking at a year graph here of, for example, the term, the profane term in the Philippines. And I'm sorry for the language. This research, the nature of the research was such that we had to face this very ugly vitriol. But it peaked during lockdown in that May 2020 time. And then you look at a term like feminazi, which is quite clearly associated with misogynist leanings. And that's from Indonesia. The searches for it peaked in May, and they're significantly higher than they've ever been, about a 3-fold increase compared to any time during the past 12 months. So again, a strong correlation there. The second key finding about these new narratives that sexist organizations are spreading related to COVID. This was very, in some ways surprising for us because of the creativity of some of these narratives. So we looked at, what are these groups that are openly misogynist? What are they saying on Facebook with regards to COVID? And we found these were the top narratives. And these were the number of posts we found that directly espoused these. So number one was, COVID is exposing the ugly truth about women, or women are more dangerous than men during COVID. There were a lot of posts about how the real victims of domestic violence during lockdown are actually men, not women. And there were links to fake news stories about men getting beaten up. And there was a lot of, interestingly, across India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia, we saw a lot of references to laws being unfairly biased against men, and that COVID was highlighting this. And a lot of that came from child separation issues. So in divorced fathers complaining that because of COVID, they can't see their sons, and therefore it must be some feminist conspiracy. And if you see some of these posts, you would think they were, you would think nobody can be serious, because some of these narratives were quite out there. I mean, there were posts about how women feminist groups invented COVID as a way of harming men. There were posts about, that COVID is a disease that only affects men. Government conspiracies headed by a feminist secret underground. I mean, it gets crazier and crazier the more you go into it, but that's not to belittle the effect these posts are having. And that's the dangerous part. These are just some examples of some of the posts we saw. So this one on the left is from Sri Lanka. It's a meme where they're trying to use humor to say, be good to your spouse. Remember, they could poison you and it would be counted as a COVID death. On the right, here's one of those posts from India that I was talking about, which highlights saying, it claims that COVID is highlighting an anti-men bias in our laws. Husbands will face institutional quarantine if wife complains of domestic violence. So these were the kinds of narratives that you saw. And what was really interesting is that how quickly these narratives appeared. Look at that post on the right is April 19th. That was just 3 weeks after lockdown was announced in India. On the left, that's April 29th from Sri Lanka, just a couple weeks after lockdown went into effect there. And already these narratives are fully formed. There's content that's being produced and shared widely. Again, some more examples, one from Indonesia, and our colleagues who speak Bahasa will understand that, but that's a misogynist joke, basically talking about, comparing women to coronavirus. And then, of course, on the right, we've got another one from South Asia about the COVID highlighting anti-men bias, saying coronavirus is, quote, worse on men, which, of course, so much research debunks, and calling on the government to recognize that. So these were some of the examples of the narratives. And the third key finding was that Twitter accounts, as I mentioned, are disproportionately affecting the attitudes of their followers. How did we figure this out? Well, the methodology on Twitter was we first collected all the tweets that contained misogynist language related to COVID. For example, COVID plus feminazi. If a tweet had those two words in it, we counted it as COVID misogyny. Then we built a retweet network of users. And this, for any of my technology friends on the line, we used artificial intelligence and machine learning to create a gbot object in Python that shows the model of how everyone is sort of connected to everyone else. We trained a neural network to calculate a misogyny score, so to assess how misogynist or not misogynist each tweet is based on sort of a neural network and a machine learning model. And then we removed those people who had a misogynist score from the system and recalculated what the mean opinion would be of the entire system if those misogynist tweets were not there. And this is based on a well-documented principle in social media analytics, which says that your opinion on a given topic is usually close to a weighted average of all the opinions you are exposed to on social media. So the question we were trying to answer is, what happens if you remove the misogynist opinions? How does it affect the likelihood of other people being more or less misogynist? And what we found was that in India, Indonesia, and Philippines, all three countries we looked at, the misogynist tweets were likely to influence people who were seeing them 25% more, meaning that they would change the misogyny score of an average person by 25%. And this is simply because the misogynists they tweet a lot more often. They are much more connected to everybody in their network, and their tweets get more traction. Even if they're not getting as many likes, they get more views because of the shocking content. So in Indonesia, misogynists are likely to cause a 25% increase in people's negative attitudes towards women. In India, that's 20%. And in Philippines, that's 19%. And these graphs all show sort of the misogyny score of the network before misogynists were added and after they were added. So in every case, it goes up by around 19% or 20%. So that kind of wraps up our research, and I'd love to take questions afterwards, but in the interest of time, to move on to our second activity, the My Power trainings that we did. This is our third year doing them with UN Women. The purpose of these trainings is to teach young women how to combat misinformation and hate speech, and to create PVE and gender equality themed content. We conducted 4 of these trainings across Bangladesh and the Philippines. 3 out of 4 of them were virtual. 1 was a hybrid as things began to open up last month in Philippines. And the result was the participants created 30 videos during these trainings. Now you might ask yourself, what is the connection between PVE and creating content? Well, there's a great study, many great studies, one notably by Rusi, which was published, the Royal United Services Institute, talking about, and I think our friend from Indonesia alluded to this earlier, that women are not just victims in extremist groups, but are many times lured to join these groups because of a false sense of empowerment. The groups say, hey, come join us, we'll teach you how to fight, we'll give you a gun. It sounds empowering. Of course, you get there and you realize it's a completely different reality from what you were sold. So we thought that the genesis behind these trainings is, what if we could remind the young women and really help them embody and recognize and acknowledge the fact that they are already powerful. They don't need these other outside groups in order to feel powerful. They don't need to join an ISIS or an extremist group or be lured by any bad organization like that. And the way we do that is the first part of the training teaches them how to combat misinformation, hate speech, how to identify, report, protect against this content on social media. And the second half has them create their own videos where they show a powerful female protagonist overcoming a major relatable problem, whether it's child marriage or denied access to education or hate speech or extremism. And by making this video, by this experiential learning process, the women are much more likely to truly deeply absorb the lessons of the training and to feel more powerful and therefore less susceptible to that false sense of empowerment that extremist organizations are trying to spread. The trainings were quite successful. We were happy with the reception. Based on survey responses, we found that participants were far more confident in their ability to identify, report misinformation, extremist content, as well as to film and edit edutaining videos. And most importantly, 100% of participants said they continue to create positive themed videos even after the training, making them quite sustainable. And many of them have indeed created these videos. And we'll be happy to share the links to the channel where all these videos are kept afterwards if anyone is interested. One quick anecdote as well, that one of the women who was part of our training in Bangladesh, and Ziabai was there with Brack, she became the target of hate speech right after our training. But thankfully, she was able to use what she learned to report the hate speech against her, and Facebook actually took that comment down and banned that user so they couldn't harm anybody else. This was a great example of the learnings in action right away. And lastly, so that's on the training, the My Power trainings. We've done them in 4 countries now. Happy to talk and take questions about that after. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the comedic videos. We've created 3 videos as part of this program that all work to promote social cohesion and counter extremist narratives in Indonesia, the Philippines, and 1 transnational video that was filmed during the pandemic. It's called The Famdemic. It features comedians from 5 different countries. Overall, we've worked with comedians and influencers from 7 countries: Philippines, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and India. And the purpose of these videos, again, is to use that edutainment to help prevent violent extremism and promote gender equality. These videos are going to be released very shortly. I'd like to just show a small clip from one of them, if I may. If we could cue that up, please, Tom. This video is...
Gimana, semua kalian siap?
Siap! Maybe, Tom, sorry, can I just explain it?
Oke, produk pertama.
So this video is from a video that's going to be released this week in Indonesia, created in partnership with local comedians, Cameo Project, as well as a talented singer and influencer and actor, Mentari Novel. It's actually a sequel to another video we had created, also supported by the government of Japan and UN Women 2 years ago, called HISIS. This is part 2. It's about it's a satire about what if in this one, HISIS, a group that recruits women and is like ISIS, has decided that the most effective way for them to peddle their ideology is to act like a MLM, a multi-level marketing network. So they're basically creating a pyramid scheme where you can join the HISIS network, sell their products, and therefore spread their ideology. Of course, their products represent their views of gender stereotypes and toxic masculinity that they're using to try and recruit young men and young women to join their cause. So this video explores how extremists are using toxic masculinity and gender stereotypes to further their agenda using a comedic, a satirical lens. This is just a small clip. What's happened in the video so far is these police officers have gone undercover, pretending that they want to be part of this network, just so they can learn what's really going on. And the HISIS lady is giving them a demonstration of HISIS's latest products. So thank you, Tom. If you could please take it away.
Gimana, semua kalian siap?
Siap!
Oke, produk pertama. Produk pertama adalah untuk pria yang ingin memberikan pasangan mereka sesuatu yang sangat dibutuhkan dan diinginkan, yaitu rasa aman dan perlindungan. Kita semua tahu ya di sini bahwa wanita itu diibaratkan sebagai bunga yang rapuh yang harus dilindungi dari manusia-manusia berhati jahat. Pria sejati pasti ingin membebaskan wanita dari bahaya. Oleh sebab itu, kalian harus memberi produk kami, yaitu gelang kebebasan. Dengan mengenakan gelang kebebasan di sekeliling tubuh pasangan kalian, kalian bisa membebaskan mereka dari pria-pria yang penuh dengan hawa nafsu. Harganya murah, cuma 150.000. Kalian bisa lihat, dengan satu harga, kalian mendapatkan 2 gelang. Satu untuk tangan kanan dan satu lagi untuk tangan kiri.
Apa yang lebih dibutuhkan dari seorang wanita melebihi rasa aman dan dilindungi?
Gelang kebebasan betul-betul membuat pikiran saya menjadi bebas.
Kalian bisa memanjakan kami dengan gelang kebebasan yang memberikan kami rasa aman, nyaman, dan bebas untuk menjadi apapun yang kalian mau.
Tunggu apa lagi? Beli sekarang juga.
Apa jadinya kalau pasangan kami terbebas dari gelang kebebasan? Maksud saya, apa jadinya kalau gelang kebebasan itu justru membuat pasangan kita jadi tidak bebas?
Pertanyaan yang bagus sekali. Penelitian mengatakan bahwa gelang kebebasan bisa membebaskan wanita sebesar 99,7% dari bahaya yang pernah ada. Tapi masih ada kemungkinan 0,3% bahwa mereka bisa terlibat dalam masalah atau kesalahan. Seperti dia melamar pekerjaan. Kalau pasangan kalian melamar pekerjaan, kira-kira apa alasan mereka?
Mereka ingin berkontribusi pada lingkungan sesuai dengan bakat dan minat mereka?
Bukan. Itu artinya mereka tidak yakin kalau kalian bisa mencukupi kebutuhan mereka. Kalian harus membuktikan kalau mereka salah. Dan kalian bisa buktikan itu dengan bantuan buku kami. Pilihan karir bagi wanita sejati. Harganya hanya 200.000, tapi di dalam buku ini sangat banyak pelajaran penting. Seperti contohnya pelajaran nomor 85. Yaitu karir terbaik seorang wanita adalah menjadi asisten dari suaminya. Atau pelajaran nomor 129 yaitu bagaimana cara meyakinkan suami untuk menjadi martir. Atau
Asik!
Anda kenapa?
Hah? Enggak apa-apa. Aku cuman malu
Oh, saya tahu. Anda sangat berusaha untuk menutup.
Right, so to find out what happens next, you're gonna have to watch the video. It's gonna be releasing this week. We'll be happy to share the link with everyone. But that wraps up my time. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share our work, and for all of you for being such valuable partners, UN Women, and the government of Japan especially. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priyank, for the fascinating presentation of online hate speech and the work around that. Next, we will hear from Professor Jackie True, a professor of international relations and director of Monash University's Center for Gender, Peace and Security in Australia. She will be discussing recent research on violent extremism and misogyny. But first, we'd like to play a short animation to introduce the research. Thank you.
What could drive someone to support violent extremism? Researchers have long suggested that people are drawn to violent extremist ideologies largely because of their education, religion, or economic class. But new research conducted by UN Women and the Monash Gender, Peace and Security Centre suggests otherwise. Monash surveyed over 3,000 people, evenly split between men and women, in Indonesia, Bangladesh, and the Philippines. The results revealed a shocking truth. More than any other factor, support for violence against women predicted a person's support for violent extremism. Regardless of their gender, individuals who condoned men using violence against women were 3 times more likely to support violent extremism than those who condemned it. Similarly, people who held extreme sexist views were more than 2.5 times more likely to support violent extremism than people who strongly disagreed with these attitudes. Men were more likely than women both to accept sexist attitudes and justify violence against women. This finding is crucial for the study of terrorism because it can be used to identify the risks of violent extremism within groups. The risk will be higher among individuals with hostile sexist attitudes or who justify violence against women. This research also showed that misogyny, defined as fear and hatred of women, was an integral part of the ideology and identity of current violent extremist groups. To protect communities from violent extremism, we must consider gender as a key issue. We must work to tackle sexist attitudes and stereotypes in both men and women, and to promote gender equality. Women must be empowered to become agents of change. This will lead to safer and more gender-equal communities for all. View the full research on UN Women's website at asiapacific.unwomen.org or by clicking the link below.
Thank you, and I will now turn the floor over to Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asuka. I know my colleague Leslie Davis from UN Women is going to share some slides, which I can speak through. That's such a fantastic animation, and congratulations to the animators for simplifying the research and visualizing it. Thanks, Leslie. Before I discuss the research the animation spoke to on the relationship between sexism, misogyny, and violent extremism, I wanted to go back a step and talk about the very first research project we collaborated on with UN Women. So perhaps you can follow me, Leslie, as we go through to slide 3. Great, fantastic. Through to the next one. Thank you. Yeah. So I wanted to just tell the story of how we got to look at sexism and misogyny, because we didn't go there directly. So I guess I wanted to talk about why a gendered approach to terrorism and violent extremism is so important, based on the research that we've been doing with UN Women for really nearly 4 years now. So violent extremists understand gender, peace and security possibly better than we do, and that's a major concern. And there is, I think Priyank referred to it, a growing body of research showing how violent extremist and terrorist groups are using women to their advantage. So they're recruiting women as facilitators, as fundraisers and supporters, as well as in combat or suicide bombing roles. And these groups are benefiting strategically and financially from the so-called empowerment of women. And yet at the same time, policymakers in our governments often overlook the roles that women play in violent extremism, including as perpetrators, as mitigators, and as victims. And governments are rarely enlisting women's participation in efforts to combat radicalism and to counter and prevent violent extremism and terrorism. So we started out the research with UN Women, researching alongside the programming, which was, funded by Japan and began in 2017. And in that research, we tested the idea that when women are empowered economically and also in their communities and part of the decision making, that they are would be more likely to be able to discuss tensions and insecurities, including problems of violence and extremism, and that as a result, communities and societies would be more cohesive, more resilient and peaceful. And so we wanted to see, well, is this the case? Could this idea actually yield impact on the prevention of terrorism and violent extremism? So perhaps to go to the next slide. So we started looking at this question in Indonesia and the Philippines. I think the next slide, thanks, Leslie. Next one. Okay, so hopefully we'll get the next slide soon, because it shows that when we started the research, we looked at whether or not men and women, whether or not they perceive violent extremism as a problem in their country and or in their community. And what we found is that there was a huge gender gap. So, for example, I'm going to take the Indonesia case, but it'd be really good to see the graph. That's the next slide, please. That's the, no, sorry, that's the final slide. I think you need to go back and in the presentation. Exactly, perfect. Thank you very much. And perhaps if you put it in slideshow, then we'll be able to see it. Yeah, excellent. Although that's quite small, so it might be better to just have a single screenshot. Okay, so I mean, what this graph basically shows, which I can't even see myself, but it looks at whether men and women in Bangladesh and Indonesia think that violent extremism is a very big problem, or whether it's not a problem at all. And here we can see quite significant gender differences. So basically in Indonesia, just 5% of women compared to 21% of men thought violent extremism was a big problem. And important to note that this survey was taken before the Surabaya incident in 2018, where you had 2 families engaging in suicide bombing. And one would have thought that that incident would have changed the beliefs there. At the same time, we can also see in the bottom bar graph that while 41% of women compared to just 31% of men thought violent extremism was no problem at all. So, I mean, what we theorized is that if there's no opportunities for women to discuss the problem, to talk about tensions in their community and to be actively involved in preventing violent extremism, then it's unlikely that any policies to combat extremism in the community, in the neighborhood, on the front line would be effective. So So UN Women are obviously engaged together in Indonesia with Wahid and in Bangladesh with BRAC in a range of community and women's empowerment interventions. Can I have the next slide, please? And found that, you know, and so what we did is we researched these program sites where the empowerment programming was going on. And we also chose to do the same research, field research and survey research, communities not receiving the programs. And what we found is that women in the program sites in Indonesia and Bangladesh were much more aware than women in the non-program sites of the problem of violent extremism, but also how their roles in the family and in the community could contribute to preventing and countering violent extremism. And this graph here basically depicts and shows that you know, for women on the right, in the program sites, that their level of self-efficacy in being able to talk about, but also to act on the problem of extremism in their neighborhoods, in their communities, was increased, and is as a result of the programming was more akin to the kind of self-efficacy of men in the non-program sites. So already within a year of programming, women's empowerment, community empowerment was having an impact on women's participation in prevention. So we had four main findings from this research. We saw that there was increased awareness within families and communities of the problem of violent extremism. And that was really important to the success of prevention efforts. Second, we saw, you know, really important impacts on individual empowerment and that greater confidence that women had in joining prevention of violent extremism initiatives, in reporting, you know, potential warning signs for extremism and violence, either to police or to community or religious leaders. And they also knew what to do. They increased individual empowerment, especially of women knowing what they could do, and that was found in the program sites. You know, and the programming coordinated by Wahid and BRAC. And then the third finding was really around economic empowerment and showing that when women were engaging in economic empowerment activities, giving them more income and training and know-how with regard to sustaining livelihoods, this had an impact on decreasing tensions within both the family and the community, with a broader impact on the peace and cohesion of the community. And finally, and fourth, we were able to show that increases in women's self-efficacy was also a strong predictor of support for prevention of violent extremism initiatives and for trust in institutions, importantly for trust in the police, trust in local government, trust in the media and in the law courts, and also for stronger reasoned disagreement with the use of violence. So we had a number of scenarios which we tested out around people's views on whether or not violence might be justified in a particular situation. And so I think overall this research was qualitative and quantitative, but the qualitative research, you know, a constant message we were hearing was how important the role of mothers was in preventing violent extremism, you know, in the family, in the homes, in the neighborhoods. And of course, men were quite often expressing this view. But I guess that led us to think, well, if there is an inequality in the household, you know, mothers there might be real limitations on what mothers can do and whether or not they can bring these issues beyond the home to their husbands, but also to their community leaders and so on. And also it led us to the question of, well, what is the role of fathers? And how might, changing fathers' understandings of their responsibility and their identities and their masculinity also encourage support for prevention of violent extremism. Okay, Leslie, I think we're on to the next slide now. Thank you. I can see you're having a few difficulties there, and keep going, keep going. Thank you. I think next one. Yeah, great. So, again, so this was for the next project with UN Women and also supported by Japan, we wanted to look at gender constructions of both men and women. And we wanted to look at how constructions of masculinity and femininity within families and communities might push people to join or support violent extremist groups. And so we were then researching also in the Philippines with our colleagues from the GZO Peace Center. And we were able to explore some of the gender constructions with communities that might be encouraging and attracting people to join extremist groups. So, for example, in Basilan and Zamboanga and Marawi, Mindanao, in the Philippines, we learned that women are often attracted to Arabic fighters because they're seen as more masculine, and that joining in extremist groups also, not only gave them access to a gun, to weapons, to that sense of being powerful, but also to what they deemed to be more masculine boyfriends and partners. So that's just one example of how a certain gender construction may be prevalent, but also may be harnessed and exploited by extremist groups. We also found, significant evidence across all 3 countries that of women's empowerment, of extremist groups using this notion that women can be empowered and if they join the group, that they will have important roles. That they will be tough and they will be able to, take on even combat roles alongside men. In Indonesia, we found that there was distinct recruitment language targeted at women and then at men. And then in terms of the online space, Priyank has already spoken about this more in his more recent research, but this research on Islamist extremist groups showed that rigid gender segregation of online content and spaces. So the violent extremist groups are very aware that they needed to tailor their messages specifically to particular groups of women and particular groups of men. And they quite frequently co-opted the language of women's rights to appeal to women, whilst at the same time promoting quite, we might say harmful practices, gender discriminatory practices in the context of their ideology and their affiliation with Islamic State. So we also, and now I come to the research on misogyny that was depicted in the animation. So we wanted to investigate, therefore, having analysed in the field research some of these gender constructions and some of the underlying sexist and racist ideas about masculinity. We wanted to look at whether or not these ideas might be, how they might be connected to support for and participation in violent extremism. And we also wanted to look at the relationship between support for and justifications of violence against women among groups, and whether or not views about violence against women and whether or not it's justified and culturally appropriate were related or not to those who justify the use of violence for a political cause or ideology. So in this research, and we certainly didn't expect to find it, we identified that anti-women sentiment, what we call in the research hostile sexism, also can be called misogyny, again, associated with hatred or extreme control of women, was the most significant factor associated with support for violent extremism and justification of violent extremism. So we also found that supporting and justifying violence against women, for, beating your partner because they hadn't provided a meal on time, or they hadn't adequately cared for the children, these kinds of scenarios, those who agreed that violence was appropriate and justified in those circumstances were also those who were more likely to support acts of violence for a political cause. And in fact, we found that that those who supported acts of violence against women were more than 4 times more likely to support violent extremism than those who didn't. So, and what was really significant about the research is that we also tested out the more common explanations for support and participation in violent extremism. So we looked at whether religion and whether people were committed to particular religious ideology was associated with support for the use of violence. And we also looked at education levels. We looked at gender, simply being male or simply being female. And we also looked at age and to see whether any of those factors also increase the chance of supporting violent extremism. But overall, we found that, those hostile sexist attitudes and justifications of violence against women were the most strongly significant factors in explaining support for violent extremism. And I think that was really corroborated by the field research, where a number of our participants in Bangladesh, Philippines, and Indonesia talked about the role of sexual and gender-based violence, about threats of that type of violence in both motive and pushing individuals to join extremist groups. Often it could be pushing women to join because they felt they had no other option. They were duped, but also often pushing family members to join because they wanted to protect their family members. So let me sum up. Next slide. So these are some of the sort of gender drivers that we saw in the field research supporting men and women to join violent extremist groups that related to their gender identity and their gender position in the family. So including like financial incentives for men to be able to pay bride price, form a family, and for women to simply, address their economic needs, especially if they were a widow, they were a divorcee, or they were vulnerable. And certainly this threat of dishonor was a major driver, a major gender driver for both women and men, and often for men in protecting female family members. Next slide, please. So overall, I think the research has demonstrated the importance of incorporating a gender perspective into preventing violent extremist efforts. And I think that the earlier research showed the importance of women's roles in preventing violent extremism, and their roles not only in homes, but in schools, promoting tolerance and peace, and religious institutions, in social environments in the community and in local government. And we were able to see that women, are detecting quite specific early warning signs for rising extremism. So, and that is often because early signs of radicalization actually target women's rights to mobility, to freedom of mobility, to freedom of dress, and to freedom of expression. So because women are often the first targets of violent extremists, as well as having central roles in their families and communities, they have a unique vantage point to be able to recognize unusual patterns of behavior. And that's really important to be able to report those and to use those insights in preventing and countering violent extremism. And can I have the next slide, please? And the next one. I think we're we're quite yeah, great. And perhaps jump a bit further ahead. Thank you. Yeah, and this. Speaking to the early warning signs, and this is of course a picture here of the black laundry hanging out in Marawi, which was one of the early warning signs that women noted and tried to report to the local government, but were turned away at that point. So they noticed that there was black laundry and clearly laundry linked to the ISIS affiliate. Next slide, please. Yeah. And I think just summing up that first major implication of the research, really underscoring the importance of women's roles in prevention, and this being a key statement from one of our participants in Poso, Indonesia, who said, if you want to know what the security situation is and what the indicators of safety are, don't ask the military, don't ask the local government, but ask us, ask the women. So next slide, please. And I guess the final and second point is, as the animation stated, a gender-based approach to preventing and countering violent extremism that takes seriously men and women's sexist beliefs, because women can also harbor sexist beliefs as well as men. This has the potential to better identify likely perpetrators of all kinds of extremist violence. Now, of course, there are many more men and women with extreme sexist beliefs than there are perpetrators of extremist violence, but nonetheless, this group is at high risk of joining and participating in extremist groups. And so, we should be looking for those individuals who embrace really extreme notions of manliness that stress fairness, fierceness, honor, and female subordination as being ripe for recruitment. And finally, from the research, I think we can also learn that action could be taken by security sectors in all countries to further operationalize gender-sensitive early warning systems to be able to monitor conflict, violence, community tensions, and to specifically target sexist attitudes, and to operationalize hostile sexism or misogyny as a factor in early warning for violence and extremism. So I think I'll leave it there. And this final slide, just a few reports that we've been able to produce with UN Women along the way during this research. And thank you very much to all of those who have supported it, Wahid, Brak, and also our colleagues in the Philippines and all of our partners, Gajah Mada University, Oxfam Bangladesh, and GZO Peace Center in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for sharing the fascinating findings. And the research is so important for those of us working in the PVE field. And apologies for the technical issues. We will share the PowerPoint with the audience later through emails. And lastly, in the research section, let's hear from Mr. Muhammad Badi Bazan, Research Coordinator, Brak University, and Associate Professor Debashish Kumar Kundu, University of Dhaka, for their presentation on promoting peace and prosperity, lessons from empowering young women in Bangladesh. Colleagues, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Asuka, for organizing this. So yes, Center for Peace and Justice, BRAC University, is delighted to share our program achievement and our learnings with all of you working in this Asia Pacific region. So thank you, UN Women Regional Office and our partner universities in Bangladesh for supporting this program implemented by us. So I'm going to share our program success as well as our learnings through this research. So my colleague Debashish Kumar Kundu, who is our external researcher to this, so we incorporated both internal and external views in this. So good morning to everyone, and I'm going to start this. So this is promoting peace and cohesion, lessons from empowering young women in Bangladesh. So this is all about our research, and to make you more grounded to the research, I would like to share some project background information and then research objective and methods, and so then our findings and some food for thought for future sustainability. So we start our journey with a motive like everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. This is a famous quote of Leo Tolstoy, who is the author of War and Peace. So the motivation of doing this work, this women empowering young women to promote peace and social cohesion, we start with actually empowering young women to change themselves and work as a change maker and shaper as well. So we have started this program in 2018. So Center for Peace and Justice, BRAC University, carried out a groundbreaking initiative titled Empowering Young Women, Promoting Peace and Cohesion in Bangladesh since 2018. And this project has three distinct components. One is capacity development, under which we have trained about 500 young women studying at the universities on social entrepreneurship, as well as peace, cohesion, and leadership skills. And we also train faculty members at the university who can work as the mentor to this project. And we have also 56 peace ambassadors and 200 volunteers who brought under this capacity development work. And we also took an experiential learning approach while we do this capacity development so that they can engage themselves in civic engagement. And we have a knowledge management component where we do research and also documenting our experience, success, and learnings in the public media. Where is my next slide? It is not working. Okay, so the second issue is to sustain this capacity, which is enriched by our women, female students at the universities, and to give them mentorship support while they will implement some of their innovative ideas. Eventually, we have established 2 women peace cafes as hub of civic engagement of students and experiential learning in 2 public universities, namely Begum Rokeya University, Rangpur, and Jatiyo Kavi Kazi Nazrul Islam University in Mymensingh. So you can see in the right-hand side the inauguration or launching of these 2 women peace cafe, which are actually providing the platform for the female students to incubate and nurture their innovative ideas to promote peace and social cohesion in the campus as well as in their community. It is not working. So the research objective is twofold. One is to assess the changes in the project participants' knowledge, attitude, and practice about peace and social cohesion, And the second one is to document the best practice and future pathways. And in doing so, the research used a mixed method, while we use the survey as well as a qualitative instrument to build our evidence. So what happened to the knowledge, attitude, and practice frontier with these female students who got involved in our project? So the knowledge domain is expected to be translated to attitude and practice, a desired outcome of the Women Peace Cafe activities. So what happened to their knowledge? So while we do this survey and talk to our participant of the project, they have reported actually 3 factors or 3 components for promoting peace in the society. One is coexistence, then promote social cohesion or cohesiveness, and then freedom. It is freedom of choice, freedom of movement, all kind of freedom they need. And then the second dimension is gender-based violence. I think we already heard from our previous research, Professor Jackie told, actually this attitude toward gender-based violence is a big proxy about violent extremism and the rest of it. And in our first research, while we did it in 2019, actually the female students or the students at the university identified gender-based violence is one of the major constraints of promoting peace and social cohesion in Bangladesh. So we also took this approach of combating and raising awareness on gender-based violence, how to combat, how to eliminate this in our program. So now after 3 years, what we have found, 93% of our project participants actually reported gender-based violence is a stumbling block towards peace building. And 95% of them said that the training helped them to learn about gender-based violence profoundly. And since these students are also working as social entrepreneurs, so we need, and they are mobilizing other students for their works, they need leadership skills. And they also found, the students found that the following skills are necessary to run in order to build a conflict-free society. Number 1, active listening. Second is strategic thinking. Third is organizational capacity, social entrepreneurship, and sustainable development. It is not just development, we need a sustainable development one. And we also try to examine their attitude towards social cohesion by asking a few questions, whether they agree on you need to live peacefully, or only peacefully, to living together peacefully, or only peacefully, or you need to value togetherness, adaptation, and living together all. So we have found actually a big number of students said for social cohesion, we need to live together peacefully. So we need to live together. That is the message we need to think. And attitude towards social cohesion reflected through participants' emphasis on. They also emphasize on communication skills, because that really drive a lot of confusion, rumors. And then active listening. You have to listen to others, what other people think and believe. Then non-violence attitude, then resolution of conflict, and then importance of plurality and diversity. So these are 5 components which is very much important according to our students for building social cohesion. And then regarding in the practice frontier, students were found to be active in several activities. What they are doing, the first one is they are creating platform for women to get engaged with peace building and social cohesion. What they do, discussion with women for a conflict-free society or a peaceful society. So they organize a lot of different discussion sessions in different ways, different modalities in the community as well as in the campus. Then they also develop social business ideas for women and provide support to make changes. Then third item is they organize different seminars, discussion meetings, drawing and photography competitions around peace and promoting peace and social cohesion in the community. And then the final one, after this COVID-19 outbreak, they also organized different activities around helping COVID-19 affected communities. Now I am inviting my colleague Debashish, Dr. Debashish, to tell us about the best practices and future pathways of this project. Debashish, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mathew Germans. I'm basically emphasizing on best practices and the future pathways. And the Women Peace Cafe office itself is basically a crucial locus for showcasing their achievements, and as they have decorated the office space with their photos of events and achievements, paper cutting, souvenirs, artworks, and the media reportings, etc. And this is the space, physical space, basically, where the Women Peace Cafe members, ambassadors, they're basically arranging weekly meetings, keeping detailed meeting minutes, and plans for being updated social media alike. Okay, so this is a good example of how a physical space of an office can translate it into or transformed into a socio-cultural space. And by using this space, they are basically motivating students apart from the Women Peace Cafe member. So it is a matter of motivation and we say basically good cultural practice. And at the same time, the Women Peace Cafe in Rangpur Begum Rokeya University, they have arranged a taekwondo training for the female students. And at the first phase, it was a 3-day training. And after the immense success of this first phase training, the students who were outside of Women Peace Cafe, they requested the Women Peace Cafe members to arrange the second phase training for them, and it was about 2 months. And this training particularly introduced female students to the basics of self-defense, and it was providing them effective physical and psychological preparation to prevent violence against women. And one of the participants in this taekwondo training told us that it was not only about the physical training or self-defense strategy, it was providing them immense psychological and mental support so that they can counter any odds against women. And at the same time, there are a lot of activities basically were taking place during the COVID-19 situation because they were continuing Women Peace Cafe's activities on digital platforms. So it's a transformation from offline world to online world. And they were starting several things relating to their skills and creativity through active participation on digital platforms. So they did a lot of things. For example, they arranged webinars, film screening, online meetup to keep Women Peace Cafe community together, and also move forward with their activities using Zoom, Google Meet, Skype, and other online things. Okay, and at the same time, they celebrated Human Rights Day on 10th December on 2020, and that was arranged by Women Peace Cafe of Begum Rokeya University. And by using this digital platform, a lot of activities basically had taken place. And basically the glamour and extensiveness showed that, yes, I would like to show the posters, okay, of Women's Day. That was basically designed by the Women Peace Cafe members of Begum Rokeya University, and they have already learned how to keep the meeting minutes, and it is basically showcasing their expression of creativity, expression of knowledge, expression of professionalism, and they have organized the meetings on digital platforms and embracing the challenges coming from the new normal time. So they are basically using this virtual platform as if it is a physical space, and there is no difference when pandemics are basically hitting out. Okay, and at the same time, there are some key achievements with premier qualities, because Women Peace Cafe members achieve these qualities, including leadership capacity, management capacity, entrepreneurial capacity, social capacity, organizational capacity, social awareness, and creativity through this type of online and offline activities. And these qualities have already sharpened their quality as a good citizen as well to make a difference, and also get them prepared to fight against violence against women. Okay, and at the same time, during pandemic, you know, the people like in Bangladesh, basically the poorer section of this community basically have been suffering from their daily necessities, including like rice, pulse, cooking well, and sanitizing. And how the students the members of Women Peace Cafe did is they were trying to reaching out to the community by taking the responsibility to be with them by distributing some daily essentials. And on the top right here at the example of how they distributed the material supports to these COVID-19 victims. Okay, and at the same time, by providing social business ideas, these groups have grown ways to profit from their social business as a way to sustain their initiatives. For example, we can mention Shahoshi that provided the necessary training for financial resilience. Okay, and during the COVID pandemic situation, the Women Peace Cafe members basically stood against the early marriage, child marriage, domestic violence, and how to call 999 for promoting COVID awareness. Okay, at the same time, they have created awareness about menstrual health and reproductive health to break the silence, stigmas, and taboos regarding the sanitary napkins and menstrual cycle and reproductive health, and such initiatives named like Jayantika and Shahoshi, whereas Jayantika is working towards mental health related issues, and whereas Shahoshi is working to stop the violence against women. And these two successful projects basically took immense attention within the campus and outside the campus. Okay, and what should be the future pathways? And based on our research, it is evident that there is no women-focused or women-centric co-curricular activity in the university campus, particularly in the two university campus. And now in the third phase, this program is extended to other universities. Women-centric organization is a primary necessity for the campuses as well. Okay, and the Women Peace Cafe demonstrated distinct characters by its already proven unique nature, and which should be continued and sustained. And now the question is how Center for Peace and Justice of BRAC University can continue with immediate support when program is over by providing technical supports. This is one agenda, and another agenda is there are many organic organizations within the university campus, like debating club, like drama society, like cultural organizations. So how Women Peace Cafe in this situation can expect regular supports from the university authorities, through which other organic organization survives. And at the same time, how we can develop a Women Peace Cafe niche formation model, and how we can make it successful and scale up and replicate this model to other universities in Bangladesh. So for this reason, basically, we have to concentrate more on who are the actors and how to develop a strong and vibrant network. At the same time, how we can shape the expectations of different actors, and where are the similarities, the convergence and divergence, and what are the learning, both first order and second order, in order to ensure the sustainability of these programs. Thank you. And at the same time, I would like to thank women, even women, and at the same time, I would like to thank the colleagues from Center for Peace and Justice of BRAC University, Manjur Hassan, Badiu Jaman, Jiauddin, Mahmoud Sultan, and Wahid for their nice supports. And thank you all.
Thank you so much, Zaman Bhai and Debashish. And now we will move on to the next section, which will be the discussion of the regional key insights from the Global Digital Consultation on Gender and PVE facilitated by UN Women. And this will be presented by my colleague, Ms. Iman Sayed Taha, Peace and Security Specialist from UN Women. Thank you, Iman, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First, I would like to thank the organizers and fellow panelists. It's really a pleasure being here with you today and to hear your interesting presentations. I will start by presenting a brief background on the rationale, processes, and outcome of the Global Digital Consultation for Civil Society on the gender dimension of violent extremism and counter-terrorism responses. I will then share the main points of discussion of the consultation as it reflects common challenges in all regions. Finally, I will end with sharing with you some specific insights shared by participants from Asia and the Pacific region. The Global Digital Consultations were organized by UN Women on behalf of the Gender Working Group of the UN Global Compact on Counterterrorism. The consultations took place from the period of 25th May to 5th July last year, convening 142 civil society participants from 43 countries worldwide. The consultations took place over the SparkBlue digital platform managed by UNDP, and there were 4 rooms of thematic discussions and a 5th room for drafting the public statement. To ensure transparency, the consultations were entirely moderated and reported by civil society members, with UN Women acting as a secretariat. In total, there were almost 400 substantive contributions posted, reflecting an active and a substantive discussion during the entire course of these consultations. The outcome included a strong public statement and a detailed outcome report reflecting testimonies from civil society on how violent extremist organizations affect them and their communities, the challenges presented by existing counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism responses, and also some recommendations for stakeholders. The objective and rationale behind holding such an event was based on the importance of promoting women's rights and their rights to participate in global platforms, as well as the need to strengthen global discussions on counterterrorism and gender. The priority also of consulting with women and considering women's roles in civil society on issues related to counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism are outlined in Security Council Resolution 2242 and also outlined in the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. From UN Women's side, such consultations with civil society is an integral part of our work on promoting women's rights and their participation in decision-making platforms. So some of the main points discussed by participants from all over the region were really common and a shared concern amongst all of them. So I will take you first on some of these points, and then we'll take a quick look at the specific points raised by participants from the region. The first issue that came up in the consultation is that violent extremism and terrorism in general are fundamentally human rights, peace, and sustainable development issues. This is to say that purely securitized and militarized approaches alone did not and will not address the challenges presented by violent extremism and terrorism. This is because root causes of violent extremism are structural, are interconnected with a range of inequalities and human rights violations. It is therefore imperative to invest in mid and long-term solutions anchored in peace building, development, and human rights-based approaches. The second point that was highlighted by participants is that they stress the lack of definitions and misuse of terminologies. They highlighted that this challenge has exacerbated the risks of human rights violations presented by broad and vague counterterrorism laws, strategies of prevention of violent extremism, and that it is critical to ensure there are clear and precise definitions to terms like extremism, radicalization, acts of terrorism, and especially when they are applied for a non-violent activity. Third, participants identified systematic gender inequality as a relevant challenge in the context of prevention of violent extremism. This is because gender inequalities and injustices that could be attributed to social norms, subordination, disenfranchisement, marginalization, and violence against women can be an incentive to join violent extremist groups. I would like to say the presentations previously also allude to this point. As such, addressing gender inequalities and tackling violence against women and girls is an important route to preventing violent extremism and breaking violence, cycles of violence. Fourth, participants also emphasized the need for evidence-based approaches. In order to have an evidence-based approach, there needs to be an in-depth understanding of context, as well as local solutions, and as finding solutions and responses that are basically locally driven. And for that reason, the meaningful engagement with civil society and communities is a must. And then finally, participants demanded the improvement of the accountability frameworks over what is called counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism responses, whether that be laws or strategies or action plans, and for respective responses to be assessed and measured against human rights and gender-based indicators. Particularly, participants from Asia and the Pacific region emphasized the following. First, the need for meaningful participation of women and youth in national and regional dialogues and processes related to security, and in particular to counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism. This includes extending the platforms and opportunities to local women peace builders to participate in peace processes, to support community peace structures, and to increase the protection of women-led civil society organizations and women human rights defenders. Also, participants from the region stressed that patriarchal norms remain a key challenge to attaining women's rights and tackling gender inequalities. As such, they highlighted the need to address prejudice and discrimination through the promotion of quality education, critical thinking, inclusiveness, and embracing pluralism. Furthermore, participants from the region also underlined the criticality of transitional justice processes to address existing and past conflicts, grievances, and to respond to these long-standing grievances, and to also address violent extremism within a broader peace-building effort. In fact, participants from Asia and the Pacific highlighted that securitization and militarization of PVE responses affected civil liberties like freedom of speech and freedom of movement. They also stressed that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these challenges because of the restrictions on fundamental freedoms, and that it has reinforced gender norms, inequalities, and registered an increase in sexual-based violence. Finally, I would like to end by saying that insights provided by the participants are very important and relevant for also global discussions. As such, this public statement and the outcome report were presented to representatives of permanent missions to the UN in New York. It was received with a great interest, and a very lively debate also followed after that. And I think this is also a very important timing, as currently member states are debating the 7th draft of the UN counterterrorism strategy that is composed of 4 pillars, and one of them is to address conditions conducive to terrorism, which also falls within the pillar of the prevention of violent extremism. So in that sense, the public statement and the outcome report are very, very relevant and important and timely for that intergovernmental process. So in our view, the consultation provided an important platform to connect voices of civil society organizations originating and operating in contexts directly impacted by violent extremism to global discussions. It is also our view that such consultations should be held periodically, more systematically, and not on ad hoc basis. In UN Women, we will continue to leverage our mandate and partnerships to that end. And with that, I will stop here, and thanks again for listening.
Thank you very much, Imam, for your intervention and joining us from our HQ in New York. I know it's very late for you. Thank you so much. Now we will move on to the last section of our program, looking at the key lessons learned and good practice from UN Women programs in the region. For this section, we will be hearing the voices and experiences of young women in promoting peace and social cohesion at their communities in Bangladesh, the Philippines, and Indonesia, to ensure that they could join us from their homes without any technical issues. And also within the limited time, we have asked them questions beforehand, and they have pre-recorded their powerful and inspiring messages in 5 short videos. It has 3 minutes each. However, the speakers you will see are online with us today. So first, a video from Women Peace Cafe in Mymensingh, Bangladesh. Thank you.
Nazrul Islam University has organized more than 50 events, 50 awareness-raising events to promote peace and social cohesion since its inception in 2019 in support with UN Women Bangladesh and Center for Peace and Justice, Brak University.
আমরা জানি অনলাইনে এবং সোশ্যাল মিডিয়ায় বেড়ে গিয়েছে নারীর প্রতি সহিংসতা, হেট স্পিচ, মিসইনফরমেশন এগুলো বৈষম্য বৃদ্ধিতে কাজ করছে।
News of increased discrimination, torture, and rape against women on social media frightened me and created insecurity. Since then, I was worked on online campaign against rape, creating awareness to prevent child marriage, to prevent child abuse, to increase women's self-confidence.
Women Peace Cafe has brought this opportunity to build back better. During COVID-19 period, it helps us to improve the ability to telecommute. That is very important, and also widens the way to learning new things and developing new ideas.
উইমেন পিস ক্যাফে কোভিড-19 পরিস্থিতির একদম শুরুতে তৃণমূল পর্যায়ে যেসব নারীরা রয়েছেন যারা তাদের স্বাস্থ্য সম্পর্কে সচেতন নন সেসব নারীদের মাঝে স্বাস্থ্য সামগ্রী বিতরণের পাশাপাশি স্বাস্থ্য সচেতনতা তৈরিতে কাজ করেছে।
In Bangladesh, still women spend most of their time in kitchen works, and due to the pandemic, this workload has been badly increased. And men helping in the domestic chores are still considered less masculine. They often face mocking, teasing, and criticism instead of any kind of appreciation. So we work to change these mindsets through our videos and offline and online campaigns, and we try to make them understand that the domestic work has nothing to do with gender.
Based on previous crisis events, it can be an opportunity for gender equality. It really becomes an opportunity to build women-empowered society. As a young woman, I always try to learn new things to develop myself.
We need to change the outlook of the society by increasing the leadership skills of women. Social issues need to be highlighted through digital literacy training, capacity development training. Above all, women need to work to increase their skills development.
And I think to ensure gender equality and peaceful communities, what is also necessary is that the equal pay at the workplace and the equal say at the decision-making table of women.
Thank you. And moving on, now a video from Women Peace Cafe in Rangapur, Bangladesh. Thank you.
এই মহামারী কোভিড পরিস্থিতিতে এদেশে জেন্ডার ইকুয়ালিটি এবং উইমেন এম্পাওয়ারমেন্ট এই দুটো বিষয়ে অনেক বেশি প্রভাবিত হয়েছে। সেটা অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই প্রভাবটা নেগেটিভ। এ সময় দেখা গেছে যে অনেকেই চাকরি হারিয়েছেন, ফলে তাদের পরিবারে সমাজে নানা ধরনের অশান্তির সৃষ্টি হয়েছে। এর আগে আমরা জেন্ডার ইকুয়ালিটি নিয়ে মাঠ পর্যায়ে কাজ করতাম, কিন্তু কোভিড পরিস্থিতি আসার পরে আমাদের সেই কার্যক্রম ব্যাহত হয়। তারপরে আমরা বিকল্প হিসেবে অনলাইনকে বেছে নিই আমাদের কার্যক্রম চালানোর জন্য।
করোনা মহামারীতে জেন্ডার ইকুয়ালিটি এবং সোশ্যাল কোহেশনকে প্রমোট করার জন্য আমরা টিম অ্যালিয়েট থেকে রংপুরের 5টি শিক্ষা প্রতিষ্ঠান থেকে মোট 25 জন ভালনারেবল ফিমেল স্টুডেন্টদেরকে অনলাইন ভিত্তিক ট্রেনিং দিয়েছি। আমাদের লক্ষ্য ছিল তাদেরকে মেন্টাল হেলথ, সাইবার সিকিউরিটি, সিভি রাইটিং, একাডেমিক রাইটিংয়ের ওপর ট্রেনিং দিয়ে তাদের কনফিডেন্স লেভেলটাকে বাড়ানো।
আমরা একদল তরুণ শিক্ষার্থী বেগম রোকেয়া ইউনিভার্সিটি রংপুরের। আমরা চিন্তা করেছিলাম এই ধরনের সমাজে যে ধরনের শান্তি বিনষ্ট হচ্ছে, যেই কারণ হিসেবে যেটা আমরা পেয়েছি, সেটা রোধ করতে আমরা কি করতে পারি। তো সেন্টার ফর পিস অ্যান্ড জাস্টিস ব্র্যাক ইউনিভার্সিটির বাস্তবায়ন, ইউএন উইমেনের অর্থায়নে এবং উইমেন পিস ক্যাফে বেগম রোকেয়া ইউনিভার্সিটির উদ্যোগে আমরা কাজ করে চলেছি একদল তরুণ শিক্ষার্থীদেরকে নিয়ে, যাদেরকে কর্মসংস্থানের সুযোগ সৃষ্টি করে দেওয়ার মূল উদ্দেশ্যই আমাদের ছিল। কাজের ফলাফল দিচ্ছে এবং তারা নিজেদেরকে স্কিলড করছে, এজন্য আসলে আমরা অনেক আশাবাদী। আর আমরা এটাও জানি যে
আমরা বিভিন্ন সময়ে নাটিকা, পোস্টার, এছাড়া বিভিন্ন আর্টিকেলের মাধ্যমে এসব কার্যক্রম চালিয়েছি। এর মাধ্যমে সমাজের অনেক মানুষই সচেতন হয়েছেন নারীর ক্ষমতায়ন এবং জেন্ডার ইকুয়ালিটি সম্পর্কে।
বিশেষত তরুণীদের বিভিন্ন ধরনের স্কিল ডেভেলপমেন্ট ট্রেনিং দিতে হবে, এর মাধ্যমে তারা হয়ে উঠবে আত্মবিশ্বাসী। একই সাথে তাদের জন্য নিরাপদ এবং যোগ্য কর্মস্থলেরও ব্যবস্থা করতে হবে। তবেই আমি মনে করি শান্তি প্রতিষ্ঠা এবং নারীর ক্ষমতায়ন সম্ভব হবে। শান্তি প্রতিষ্ঠায় তরুণীদের ভূমিকা এবং ক্ষমতাকে আরও শক্তিশালী করার জন্য তাদের নিজেদের অধিকার সম্পর্কে সচেতন হতে হবে এবং পাশাপাশি পুরুষদেরকেও নিশ্চিত করতে হবে নারীদের জন্য নিরাপদ পরিবেশ।
আমরা নিজেদেরকে অনেক স্কিল করতে পেরেছি। আমরা অনলাইনের যে বিষয়গুলো, টেকনিক্যাল যে সাপোর্টটা, টেকনিক্যালি যেইভাবে নিজেকে ইমপ্রুভ করা যায়, আমরা ইনশাআল্লাহ করতে পেরেছি। এই জন্য আসলে খুবই ভালো লাগার জায়গা।
Thank you very much. Now we are moving on to the Philippines, a video from Baby Franklin. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuhu. Greeting of peace and solidarity. My name is Baby Franklin Lumagining Tungay. I'm 19 years old and from Maguindanao. Currently, I'm a college student, and aside from that, I am a peace and gender advocate working with the community and countering violence and gender inequalities. During the digital literacy workshop, I have learned how to identify and counter misinformation and hate speech online, how significant women can be if we will collaborate. We can spread messages of peace and tolerance through social and economic entrepreneurship, the importance of empowering women and enhancing social cohesion during challenging circumstances. The pandemic allowed us to come up with an innovative approach adapted to support gender equality and social cohesion, bringing activism online. We use the social media for boosting and targeting, especially using social media for advocacy and creating engaging content. Social media serves as a platform to inform, educate, and raising awareness in the context of a pandemic. It seeks to empower like-minded women and youth to staunchly defend gender inequalities and uphold women's dignity and rights. Also, it is important that through social media, we capture the challenges and issues faced by the young women like me and discuss it broadly and constructively with consideration on how to arrive at solution addressing these challenges. For the past years, up to the current time, women are playing significant role in building and ensuring gender equality and peaceful communities. We have to continue engaging and have a strong commitment to working on these issues to eliminate gender-based violence, promote the leadership and policy participation of women, among other essential objectives. We believe that women can play an important role in building peace together. As for me, as a student, what can I do is to strive to complete my education, learn more about the success stories of women of Bangsamoro, draw inspiration from them, and inspire others through their stories. Dialogue is important in peace building and empowering women. We can discuss the key issues affecting gender inequalities, allowing women to participate in policy and decision-making processes could result in better policies and decisions. I've seen personally how much better social cohesion becomes when women are not just involved, but empowered to lead. We need to strengthen young women's engagement that requires action individually and collectively, coordination and partnership to take equality and inclusivity.
Thank you. And now a video from Joanna from the Philippines. Thank you.
Hi, greetings to everybody. My name is Johanna Alicia Sabado Calendarino. I'm 25 years old and I live in General Santos City, Philippines. So currently, I'm working as a regular employee of the local government unit of General Santos City. And at the same time, I'm also an online teacher at night. And I also do freelancing on weekends or depending on the schedule that I am available. So for the information of everybody, last Feb, I attended a digital literacy workshop. And to tell you, it changed me, it changed my life, and it changed my game plan. Because now I am more aware of the things that I post online, or I am more aware of the things that I should post online, and I'm also more aware of the things that I can influence towards other people. And I have learned that being a content creator is not an easy task to do because you have a lot of responsibilities that you should always remember before posting. I'm so thankful of the workshop because it made me a better person, it made me a better content creator, and it made me a better part of the women community. So now we are going to answer a few questions here. The first question is, as a peace agent, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your approaches to promoting gender equality and social cohesion? So we all know that COVID-19 has led to the slowdown of economic activity globally with implications on gender equality and social cohesion. But since I am more of an online kind of person, it really did not affect my ways or my approaches towards promoting both. Because whether there is pandemic or not, I can still do the things that I should do as a peace agent by means of posting and at the same time by means of doing contents that will help my advocacy be promoted. So here's the second question. Based on your past experiences from the past year, what do you think need to be done to ensure gender equality and peace communities? Well, for me, I think this has something to do with women engaging themselves in community and different activities as well. Because if we keep on saying that women are actually equated to men without actually doing something, then might as well let's just say that they are right. But of course, it's not what we want. We want to prove them wrong, and every day is the perfect day to do it. That's why we need to have a strong commitment and passion for it. Because we are not just women. We are women.
Thank you very much. And lastly, a video from Maria and Vita from Indonesia.
COVID-19 ada sedikit pengaruh bagi kami dalam mempromosikan kesetaraan gender dan kohesi sosial karena pemberlakuan social distancing telah membuat komunikasi sedikit terhambat karena kita tidak bisa bertemu secara langsung tetapi kita tetap bisa berkomunikasi meski hanya lewat media sosial.
Kebijakan pemerintah mengenai social dan physical distancing ini memang agak sedikit mempengaruhi bagaimana cara kami untuk menyebarkan paham perdamaian. Ya. Diskusi-diskusi menjadi tidak ada sama sekali, bahkan ketika pun ada itu baru-baru saja terjadi dengan prokes yang ketat. Tapi perempuan itu tidak hanya berhenti di situ saja. Ketika terlibat dalam gugus tugas COVID-19 di Desa Nglinggi, saya sebagai perempuan juga ikut dalam distribusi bantuan sosial yang diberikan oleh pemerintah kabupaten dan juga pemerintah provinsi, dari tempat yang ditentukan sampai kepada warga bersama dengan teman-teman yang memang didominasi oleh laki-laki. Tapi nggak apa-apa, perempuan dan laki-laki itu sebenarnya sama aja sih, karena ketika kita bisa melakukannya bersama tanpa harus memikirkan apakah ini pekerjaan laki-laki atau ini pekerjaan perempuan, karena sebenarnya tidak ada pekerjaan laki-laki maupun pekerjaan perempuan. Yang ada hanyalah bagaimana kita mau untuk melakukannya bersama-sama menjadi mitra yang baik ketika apalagi ada pandemi seperti sekarang gitu.
Dan bagaimana wanita muda dapat didukung untuk melakukan pendekatan inovatif atau pembangunan perdamaian dan pemberdayaan wanita di masa depan, yaitu dengan memberikan semangat dan motivasi untuk mendorong wanita muda turut berpartisipasi dalam membangun perdamaian. Di era teknologi modern saat ini, justru kemampuan para pemudi khususnya di bidang IT sangat diperlukan. Karena wanita muda berperan penting dalam menjembatani kesenjangan digital yang membantu para ibu-ibu agen perdamaian. Yang tua punya pengalaman, yang muda punya kemampuan lebih di bidang IT. Untuk potensi jangka panjangnya, di jangka pendek kita sudah mendapat pengalaman dan pengetahuan yang bisa langsung kita aplikasikan. Jangka menengah kita punya rencana-rencana tindak lanjut, dan di jangka panjang kita harus melakukan regenerasi sehingga ilmu atau pengetahuan sebagai agen perdamaian bisa kita turunkan kepada penerus. Dan berdasarkan pengalaman tahun lalu, yang perlu dilakukan untuk memastikan kesetaraan gender dan komunitas yang damai adalah kita tetap melakukan pemberdayaan perempuan, karena ini adalah komponen penting, dan memastikan partisipasi aktif perempuan tidak hanya dalam kegiatan ekonomi tetapi juga politik, memastikan kesetaraan gender sehingga perempuan tidak hanya menjadi angka ikut tetapi perempuan bisa turut dalam mengambil keputusan.
Dampak dari kesetaraan gender itu akhirnya memunculkan banyak perempuan-perempuan yang berani untuk berbicara, berani untuk mengambil peran, berani untuk mengeluarkan ide-ide kreatifnya. Ketika berani berperan, maka banyak perempuan-perempuan yang lebih peduli, lebih responsif terhadap orang lain karena memiliki kesempatan, karena memiliki kemerdekaan untuk memilih. Dan itu sangat luar biasa ketika perempuan juga diikutkan, diberikan kesempatan untuk ikut dalam pengambilan keputusan penting. Itu luar biasa sih.
Thank you very much to our participants for recording those amazing and innovative videos. And also thank you for the questions in the Q&A chat box. We are behind the schedule, so we will take only 2 questions now, and we will collect all the questions and respond through emails later. So probably to Priyank. Hi, Priyank, are you there?
Yes, I am, Asika. Hi.
Great. So just let me read the question. As most young people would like to be famous in social media now, given the incentive that they get from the shares and likes, what mechanism do you think we can explore to ensure that the content created, for example, with violent or misogynist narrative, will have to be filtered before they get shared? Can you give us very short answer, as we don't have enough time? Thank you, Priyank.
Sure, yes, I'll try to keep it brief. There's talk about legislation. So one thing would be to make the tech companies more accountable for the content they have. Another would be to crack down on the AI that's being used to try and detect harmful content. So again, something that the tech companies would have to do. But I think something that's more in our control is social media literacy. The more we make people aware of what harmful content is, how to identify it, how to report it, we can make everybody play their part in this, because it's going to take a collective effort. So the more people who know how to spot and report hate speech, misinformation, extremist content, the less of that kind of content we're going to see online.
Thank you so much, Priyank. Now we are moving on to the second question. How do we encourage, maybe to Women Peace Cafe members or Brack University, we have this question. It says, how do you encourage other youth, particularly male, to engage in promoting gender equality and social cohesion?
May I request my colleague Umme Kulsum or Mahmouda Sharna, because you people incorporate the male students in your work. Can you respond to it? Sharna, anyone is there?
Yes,
Please,
thank you for
go
the
ahead.
question. Yes.
Hi,
Thank you for
Sharna.
the question. Hello. Yes, first of all, we encourage them by saying that we are all the same kind, and our aim and goal and main objective are the same, that we want to make peace and social cohesion in our society, in our country, and in the world. So when our aims and our goals are the same, so we can work together and we can work for that actually. That is the way we encourage them, and when they are involved with us with the similar kind of activities, they also tend to do the same work, and their ideologies tend to be changing, and we are doing this together, and they're also encouraging other male members and other male volunteers to work with us. I think this is our way of working. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sholner. Baby Franklin or Joanna from the Philippines, and also Marian Dita from Indonesia, would you like to add about how do you engage other youth, particularly male, to engage in promoting gender equality and social cohesion? Okay, if we are not going to have your answers, oh, sorry, Dita?
Yeah.
And I think Visna is also online to translate.
Yes, I'm ready. Please, Vita.
Thank you so much. So the question was, how do you encourage other youth, particularly male, to engage in promoting gender equality and social cohesion? Thank you.
Bagaimana Vita mengengage para pemuda dan pemudi untuk memberdayakan mereka sebagai bagian dari keadilan gender dan kohesi sosial?
Pemberdayaan untuk perempuan dan pemuda itu bisa dilakukan dengan banyak hal, terutama dengan seni budaya misalnya. Seni budaya, dan juga bisa juga dengan mengajak mereka melakukan hal-hal yang mereka suka. Jadi ketika misalnya di pandemi ini banyak orang yang terdampak. Anak-anak muda kita ajak untuk berempati, untuk ambil bagian dalam menjadi orang yang mau berbuat untuk sesama di masa pandemi, seperti distribusi bantuan sosial dan lain sebagainya. Gitu.
Okay. We provide and we engage youth during the pandemic situation in order to support the civil society in the village as well as to support the women's victims, so they can able to meet their family basic needs, for example, for economic situation and social situations. And moreover, we train them and we involve them in the culture and art the activities. For example, we provide them the training for art and training for culture, so they can express their self to learn art for peace. We also create a youth task force in order to detect and to respond the conflicts from their family. So if, for example, there's a conflict in their family, they can report to the village task force, and they also can prevent their sister, their brother from the conflict itself. Kamu mau ngomong lagi, Fit?
Selain itu, anak-anak muda juga mau untuk mengajari, membantu, menjadi bagian dari solusi ketika ada orang, anak-anak terutama ibu-ibu yang kesulitan mengajari anaknya sekolah online. Jadi mereka ikut ambil bagian di situ sebagai seorang pemuda, menjadi bagian dari solusi dari masalah-masalah yang ada. Selain itu kan pemerintah desa juga bekerja sama dengan masyarakat luas supaya masalah-masalah di masa pandemi ini bisa teratasi dengan baik.
Okay, one of the biggest challenge that we have during the pandemic situation is about the internet access in our villages. Sometimes we cannot do the online learning in the school because of more and more children now they cannot go to school because of the pandemic, so they cannot easily to receive the learning session from their teacher. So that's why because of our civil society in the fields, mostly they are work as a farmer, as a woman worker, so even they don't have a cell phone. So how can they buy the internet access if they don't have a cell phone? Based on that, we provide them together with the youth. We provide them to create a learning space so the children can receive the school teaching via online for free. And we also advocate to the village government, so the village governments can provide the free internet Wi-Fi for the children, so the children can receive the school learning materials.
Thank you so much, Vita and Bisna, for sharing the challenges and also great youth activism. From Philippines, do you want to add? Okay, I think. Oh, Maria, did you raise your hand? You want to add?
Oke.
Thank you.
Perkenalkan, saya Maria Sandy. Saya adalah perempuan desa dari program Desa Damai White Foundation di Kelurahan Candirenggo, Singosari, Jawa Timur, Indonesia. Apa yang perlu dilakukan untuk ikut memastikan atau mempromosikan kesetaraan gender dan kohesi sosial adalah seperti yang udah saya sampaikan tadi, dengan tetap melakukan pemberdayaan perempuan dan memastikan partisipasi aktif perempuan dalam pengambilan keputusan. Dan ada salah satu keinginan tertinggi kami adalah bagaimana suara perempuan bisa masuk dalam kebijakan desa. Pak Bisna mungkin mau translate?
Alright, so the first thing that we do for ensuring the woman equality at the grassroots level is we try to advocate the village government in order to put our voice voice in the village regulations. So that's why we talk to the village head to create the only woman forums for the village. This forum is to voice our voices, to voice our needs to the village government, so the village government can put our idea in their village program for the future ahead. For your information, the Women Village Forum is the first one in Indonesia. So the village can have the women forums. So the village can have the Women Village Forum into their regulation. You want to add some? Mau ngomong lagi, Mbak Sandy?
Oke.
Mungkin mau
Jadi,
cerita teroris?
oh ya, ini saya mau cerita sedikit. Pernah terjadi penangkapan keluarga teroris di Candirenggo yang melakukan pemboman di wilayah Surabaya. Surabaya adalah ibu kota Provinsi Jawa Timur, Indonesia. Kejadian tersebut membuat keresahan dan ketakutan warga. Dan kita, kelompok perempuan agen perdamaian White Foundation dengan program Desa Damainya, berusaha untuk mendekati istri dari pelaku pemboman tadi. Dan kita bisa mendekati dengan kewirausahaan, bagaimana ibu ini bisa mendapatkan uang, sehingga bisa memenuhi kebutuhan hidup keluarganya, karena memang suaminya sudah tiada pada saat penangkapan oleh polisi. Dan si ibu tadi adalah tukang pijit, dan kita sebagai kaum perempuan ikut membantu mempromosikan usaha jasa pijit yang dilakukan oleh ibu tersebut. Si ibu yang awalnya takut sama kita akhirnya mau bergaul, sehingga ibu ini tidak lagi menyebarkan isu-isu yang berbau radikal maupun teroris, dan sekarang sudah bisa menjalani kehidupan normal seperti kehidupan yang lainnya. Mbak Susna.
I had one story that me and our women's groups try to involve the wife of the ex-terrorist into the economic engagement. The terrorist that was shot by the police detachment 88 in Surabaya. Surabaya is the province, the East Java province in Indonesia. There was a story that the terrorist was shot by the police detachment 88. The wife of the terrorist lived in Candirenggo, our village. Then after that news, we are very shocked, and all the villagers would like to exclude this woman, so this woman must go out from the village. We realized that every woman, every children, every human has the right to live in our family. Then we talked to the village head to not exclude this wife of the terrorist. Then after the discussion and mitigation of the conflict, and after we mediate these situations, we then involve this woman into the economic businesses. We know that this woman has a strong point in massage. So then we try to introduce her to the civil society, and we involve her in the economic training, economic businesses, as well as peace building training. After the wife of the ex-terrorist engaged with our activities, this woman then slowly but sure trying to stop the seeding radicals narratives. So then this wife of the terrorist now become one of our member in women groups, and she now try to share the peaceful narrative and try to stop the radical narrative into the society. The learning point of these activities is the women can be perpetrators, but in the other hand, they can also be peace agents. And we try to trust every woman being can get involved in the peace agents. So that's why now the women children, her children now can go to school, go to the public school, and she can also involve in our activities. And now she become the woman task force to protect and to prevent conflicts in our society.
Thank you so much, Maria and Visna. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left, so this will conclude the discussion section of the event. And now I invite Sarah to deliver the closing remarks. Sarah, over to you. Thank you so much.
Hello, colleagues and guests. Thank you very much for a very, very rich session this morning. I would like to really thank all of you for your great generosity in sharing so much time with us this morning. Our meeting was quite long, and I really appreciate you all sticking with us, because I think it was fantastic to have the opportunity to hear from so many of our partners and stakeholders, and particularly rich to hear from the young women and men who are really the agents of peace working in this program. So I would like to close by reiterating UN Women's very warm thanks to the government of Japan for their generous support to this event and to our program on PVE, as well as once again thanking our partners, including the National Counterterrorism Agency BNPT from Indonesia and BRAC University of Bangladesh, all of our speakers and audience from academia, from civil society and from the private and public sector. We really appreciate all of your contributions. It was really a great pleasure, as I said, to have so many young participants joining and to hear your voices. Thank you so much. I really think that your creativity, passion and spirit are very inspiring when we think about prospects for the future in our region. In today's event, we heard once again the sad truth that recent research has revealed, that misogyny is a pervasive part of the ideology of extremist groups. We also learned that misogyny in our region was not only exacerbated by the pandemic, adding to the many challenges that individuals and communities are facing. But despite all of this, we've also heard about the amazing resilience and strength displayed by women, along with their male allies, in communities around the region to promote women's leadership for peace and gender equality in the face of the pandemic. All of the participants have shared emerging best practices that can and should be scaled up around the region, and UN Women stands ready as a partner to support these endeavours. In closing, I would finally just like to encourage everyone to visit UN Women Asia Pacific's website to read more about the research that was discussed today, as well as to learn more about our projects on PVE and women, peace and security in the region. We also do encourage you to join UN Women along with other partners from UN agencies, member states, civil society and the private sector for our Generation Equality campaign. This is currently being launched with the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico, and it's the largest global gathering for gender equality since the Beijing Fourth World Conference on Women 25 years ago. Colleagues will be adding a link in the chat box so that you can find more information, and I'd like to emphasize that one of the aspects of the campaign is the compact focusing on women, peace and security, which of course includes the important work that you're all engaged in. So thank you once again for your time today and for attending this event. We hope to see you online for Generation Equality and other campaigns where collectively we have further opportunities to tackle the unfinished business of achieving gender equality. And we look forward very much to continuing efforts to engage with your important work as we move forward together. Thank you so much, everybody, and bye-bye. Over.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I will now pass the floor to my colleague Fanny to conduct a brief evaluation portion before we all log off. So please stick around if you can for this part. This will help us make our events even better in the future. Thank you. Fanny, over to you.
Hi, Aska. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. As we're running out of time, we actually decided to to send this feedback part as a survey instead to all of our participants. So you will shortly receive a link to a survey which is connected to feedback of this session. So I'm handing over to you again, Aska, to just close the event, and I'm thanking everyone for participating today.
Okay, great. Thank you, Fanny, and everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you again in our next webinar. Thank you and bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Asuka. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Du même endroit. I can hear you, Jerry, but I've got nothing on the mic.
In Kigali, she wakes up. She makes that choice. In Hanoi, Natal, Ramallah. In Tangier, she takes a breath, lifts up her voice. In Lahore, La Paz, Kampala. Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman. You cry and I hear you. We are one woman. You hurt and I hurt too. We are one woman. Your hopes are mine, and we shall shine. In Wallace, she speaks the truth. She reaches out, then teaches others how to. In Jaipur, she gives her name. She lives without shame. In Manila, Sultan Boo. Though we're different as can be, we're connected, she with me. We are one woman. Your courage keeps me strong. We are one woman. You sing, I sing along. We are one woman. Your dreams are mine, and we shall shine. We shall shine.
And one man, he hears her voice, and one man, he fights her fight. Day by day, he lets go the old ways, one woman at a time.
Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we